so enjoying your comments and the things that you're learning, your emails. Different ones of you have emailed me, and then just watching the different states that are represented in who's joining this study. It's been amazing. I think there's 8 states now represented with the girls and women that are doing this. So that's really, really exciting to me, and it's really blown my mind. I had never imagined that it would go that far. So excited to have you. I hope you're inviting your friends and enjoying this study as we go through the book of Ruth. Quick review through this last, just as we recap week 2. We did a little bit about traveling, like some geography, just a little bit to kind of visualize the journey from Moab to Bethlehem. And that was really cool for me to see, wow, like just the distance, to be able to visualize that, picture that in my head. I don't know about you, but I do not like traveling. I spent a majority of my teen years on the road. We were in full-time ministry, and so we did a lot of traveling, and although I would trade it for nothing, like I really enjoyed getting to know new people, different areas, and that sort of thing, but I don't like the car rides. And so just imagining Ruth and Naomi probably on foot from that journey from Moab to Bethlehem, I do not envy that at all. And I'm wondering how many of you like to travel, because I have a lot of friends that do. They just love traveling the countryside, and I'm not that kind of a person. I would rather fly any day just because it's faster, but driving, not my cup of tea. We also touched a little bit on Job and David and Hannah and how they had different times in their lives that were very tough, and they ran to the Lord versus becoming bitter. They became better. And those tough times can present those opportunities. What are you going to do with those? Are you going to become better and closer to God, or are you going to turn away from God and become bitter? And so that was kind of we saw that with Naomi, her bitterness, when she said, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara," which is the word bitter. So we learned a little bit about this, but then Ruth, just want to take off here by starting in Ruth 1:22. It's the last verse in chapter 1. It says, "So Naomi came back from the land of Moab with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabitess. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest." And I love it for a second. I mean, you read that, it's the end of the first chapter, you hear all these things that have happened to them, and then it's kind of interesting how God inserts that verse in there, that they arrived just at the same time that barley harvest began in Bethlehem. Now, obviously, this isn't coincidence. This is God orchestrating this. This is providence here, that they would come at a time when food was available, and that they could take advantage of some of the harvesting. We read a little bit about that, the harvest. The Israelites had some rules about harvesting and how they were to leave like corners of their fields for the poor, the fatherless, the widows. And so I'm not sure if Ruth already knew about this cultural thing in Israel, or if she was just hoping that somebody would take pity on her, but she decides to go and start gleaning, getting some food for her and her mother-in-law. But I love when I sat and read this verse, and how the providence of God is that she began to just do the thing in front of her. She began to say, okay, I am going to go and help provide for my mother-in-law. And that looks different for all of us, but it just takes me to the word faithfulness. Ruth decided to be faithful in the little things. So she decided, okay, I'm going to go get some food. And while she's in those moments of faithfulness, the daily grind, really, and we've all been there. There's things that we feel like are small and insignificant, And I have to do it every day. You know, every day there's dishes. Every day there's new laundry. Every day there's dirty diapers if you're in that stage of life. And so instead of sitting there moping that she was a widow and she was with this bitter lady, her mother-in-law, and all these things that she could have complained about, she decided to just be faithful in the small things. And so she went out, and in those faithful times, girls, that's when God shows up, because he loves a content heart. He loves someone who is focusing on the things that we need to be focusing on instead of begrudging the things that we wish we had. And so we see this with Ruth. She decides to go and do the small things, to go and provide for her mother-in-law and trust God with timing. 1 Thessalonians 5:24. Girls, I just want to encourage you with this. It says, "He who calls you is faithful. He will also do this." You know, sometimes, I don't know where each of you are in your lives, but I thought about the fact of singleness. Now, some of you may be way too young to even be thinking about marriage at this time, but just store this in your bank, your memory bank for later, because there may come a time in your life when you feel like God is not showing up with the guy of your dreams, okay? Or maybe it's, maybe right now it's a friend that you wish they were a little kinder to you, and you wish they would hurry up and get over the grudge they have. Or maybe it's a job that you want, and it's not coming as fast as you'd like it to. There's a whole lot of different things, but we need to just be faithful in what's in front of us. We need to say, Lord, I don't understand your timing, but I'm willing to wait for it, because God's timing is always perfect. We don't understand it, but it's always perfect. He knows all things. He knows the bigger picture. And so sometimes he waits for reasons unknown to us, but in the end, it will be worth it. And I think where I am in my life as a single woman, I'm 27 years old, and so sometimes people can be like, it's not working, Faith, you need to hurry up and like start looking for a guy or something. And really, God has just given me such a great contentment, because he has me here for a purpose and a time, and I just want to be faithful in the things that he's given me. And if marriage is in the future for me, he will provide that person at the right time. I don't have to go banging on doors and looking for Mr. Right. He'll come, because God is faithful. He will do it. And so just remember that in those times when you feel like all this monotonous, this grind, God is faithful. He will do what he has promised that he will do. You don't have to worry about the details. Just be faithful in the small things, and he will make you leader over many. So then enter Boaz. Okay, we've all been waiting for this moment, because it's like Prince Charming is coming to rescue Ruth, right? So here we see Ruth enters, or Boaz enters the story in chapter 2. And I love how through these different verses, they use these little phrases like, oh, it just so happened, and all these little like cliches like, oh my goodness, it just happened, it was an accident, but she just happened to be in his field or whatever. And we know that's providence. It is not a happenstance. God orchestrated every little detail, even down to the timing of when they entered Bethlehem. And so here comes Boaz. And for your information, the name Boaz in the Hebrew, as close as I could get it, was it means in him is strength. And really Boaz, through this whole story, he exemplifies what his name means. So I'm trying to picture, I always like to put myself in this story, you know, pretend like I'm a fly on the wall. And so I look at Ruth and I think, I wonder if she looked different. Maybe her skin was a slightly different color, or she dressed differently. Maybe she had an accent. I have no idea. But obviously, as Boaz enters his field, he says, "Who is this girl?" So he knows she's a little different, okay? But what singled her out more than anything was her character. And we see in Proverbs 22:1, Scripture says, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches." So we see that Ruth has this name already. Maybe they lived in maybe Bethlehem was a small town, and I live in a small town, so I kind of know how this is. Everybody knows everybody's business. So maybe people are talking about Ruth, like, wow, this new girl, and she's from a different country, but she's faithful. She's so faithful to her mother-in-law, who's kind of crusty and bitter at this moment, and she's just faithful with her. She's just there for her and taking care of her. And so this has obviously gotten to Boaz. Maybe he hasn't seen her yet, but he knows of her, okay? And so in Ruth 2:8 and 9, Boaz says to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, don't go and gather grain in another field, and don't leave this one, but stay here close to my female servants. See which field they are harvesting and follow them. Haven't I ordered the young men not to touch you? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars that the young men have filled." Now, a little bit we studied, if you did your homework, which is a really good thing to do, we talked a little bit about the cultural things with water or food. And so it wasn't customary for a man to draw water for a woman, much less a foreign woman, okay? So in this moment, Boaz goes over the cultural barriers and he provides for her in a way that is like unheard of, okay? He says, "My young men are going to draw water and you are welcome to drink it." Normally, it would be the other way around. Normally, it would be the foreign women or the girls that are drawing water for the men, okay? And that's just kind of how it worked back then. Whereas he's switching this. Boaz is saying, you don't have to do this. I am going to provide for you. I'm going to protect you. He even says that he has already talked to the young men to not bother her. And that's amazing. We talked a little bit about Hesed, love, which is like extraordinary kindness, loyalty, faithfulness. This is a kind of love that's unconditional and it is very unheard of. So Boaz has this kind of love. He reaches out to Ruth. Now, this isn't like a romantic theme at this point. This is him knowing the character of Ruth and saying, "I want to protect this girl." And girls, let me just say, God has provided men out. There are men out there that are godly, that are full of character, and that will take care of you. And they may not be even related to you or in your immediate sphere of influence, but there are men that will play the man part, and they will open doors for you, and they will be kind to you, and they will take care of you in moments that you need it, and be grateful for that. If you see that in a man or in a young man, you need to be grateful for that, and be this kind of woman where Ruth, later, she bowed her face to the ground and she said, "Why are you so kind to me?" I'm kind of getting a little ahead because that's next week, but just this extraordinary kindness that Boaz shows to her. I mean, not only does he go across the cultural barriers, but then he provides for her food. He says, stay with my servants, and anything they harvest, you harvest with them. So he was giving her a place to feel safe, a place to be provided for, to be protected. This is extraordinary. This was just unheard of in the day, because he was going across against over these lines that were drawn in the sand, and he was really risking in some ways because this wasn't customary, but he chose to go above and beyond. And I think Boaz is an amazing picture of someone else in Scripture, and God is setting the stage. Boaz is a picture of who Jesus is, because in the end, Boaz redeems Ruth, and we'll talk about that later. But this covenantal, this amazing, extraordinary love that he has for a complete stranger, that's the kind of love that only God can give. And so we see this in Boaz, a foreshadowing of who Jesus is, our Redeemer. And Boaz ends up being Ruth's Redeemer. I wonder if you have a personal story of someone who has been extraordinarily kind to you before. Okay, so I'm thinking about two stories about kindness that people have shown to me, like extraordinary kindness. These are just the first two that come to my mind. One of them is that I was staying somewhere for a while, and I really like coffee. You can see that. I like coffee. And so I get headaches if I don't have it, because my body is kind of dependent on it. And so anyway, I was staying in this place, and our friend came with coffee in the morning. I was like still in my pajamas, and brought me coffee and cream, and that like the fact that that person thought of that meant a lot. And another time was, I can remember, this is like a year ago, and I got food poisoning, and I won't tell you what restaurant because I don't want to get in trouble on YouTube, but I got food poisoning, and it was really bad. I've never had that before, and I was very sick. I was traveling actually, and so I ended up being very sick at someone else's house, which is super awkward because you feel like, oh, you know, and I was throwing up like every 10 minutes. It was awful. And just the hospitality of that couple when I'm in their home, very sick, and it could be potentially a really terrible thing, you know, sick at someone else's house. But they were just so kind and gracious to me, and they showed me a lot of kindness and love during that time, and I really appreciated that. But I want to hear your stories of times that people have been extraordinarily kind to you. Your challenge for the week is showing extraordinary kindness to somebody. Just ask the Lord, who am I supposed to show kindness to this week? Maybe it's writing a card to someone. Maybe it's giving a small gift. There's a lot of different ideas that God might give you, but I'd love to hear about how you're doing that, how you're showing that kindness, that love that only comes from Christ to other people. And I want to close with Lamentations 3:22 through 24. It says, "Because of the Lord's faithful love, we do not perish, for his mercies never end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will put my hope in him." Look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you again next week.